Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's workshop. My name is Michelle Jones, and I'm so excited to have each and every one of you with us here today. I am joined by Lauren Chandler. Hi, Lauren.
Hi, thanks for welcoming me.
Yeah, we are so glad to have you here today. Lauren is a chef educator, and so she doesn't just cook things, she also is very good at teaching people how to cook better. So we're very happy to have Lauren here. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about her, but before we get started, Lauren Chandler is a plant-forward chef educator with 25 years of experience teaching people to cook and eat well. A graduate of the Natural Gourmet Institute and former faculty member at the National University of Natural Medicine, she specializes in making nourishing, everyday cooking approachable and fun. Her work celebrates how small shifts in the kitchen bring joy and meaningful change to people and to the planet. So, Lauren, thank you for being here with us today. I'm going to just turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. So happy to be here with you all. Picky eaters, we get a bad rap, but I would even consider let's have a reframe. We like what we like. We're discerning, right? That's fine, and we can work with it. We're not forcing anyone to eat anything that they hate, but we can change the food. We can change how the food and the ingredients show up in a dish so that people can enjoy them. I think about texture and flavor the most here. So, blending and mashing or mincing, mixing ingredients, that texture really matters. If you blend something in, it might just be a textural thing and not even the flavor that is the thing that bothers you. And keeping flavors familiar, when there are flavors that you like and textures, try to keep those the same and integrate the ingredients. So familiar dishes and flavors like perhaps pasta, tacos, burgers, there are all sorts of ways to get some of these ingredients that people tend not to like as much, maybe some beans, maybe some greens into those dishes or soups or dips. So I want to mention beans again because we're going to be using legumes today as more of a background player. So they'll be in there, but they're not going to be the first thing that you taste. You might not taste them at all because the texture and the flavor just blends right into the rest of the dish. So we're going to make a soup. We're going to start with the soup and then move on to a salad dressing and then a smoothie. And the soup, it's actually a riff on a soup here in Portland, where I'm based. It's a soup from Elephant's Delicatessen. It's a tomato orange soup. And to be honest with you, when I first went in there and I saw tomato orange soup, I thought, that actually doesn't taste very good or sound very good to me. But they have samples. So I decided to try it and it was divine. I loved it. And what I found out was that this is a really popular recipe and it's actually published online. And when I looked at it, there was a lot of cream and butter. And I just thought, let's think about a way to make this more healthful. So I've adapted this recipe a whole lot. And we're going to blend in some carrots and beets and some white beans and a little bit of cashew and just riff on it to make it so healthful and also delicious. So we're going to start with an onion. We're only going to use half an onion, though I often do a double batch. It freezes well. And I always love to teach how to chop an onion because that's always a question that I get. And so if you're looking at this onion, this is the root here, and we've got the top. And if we let this grow, this would be underground, and this is the part that would be green and coming up. So we're going to trim that top part of the onion and then cut through the center here now that we have more of a flat surface to work with, so it's a little less wobbly. So I'll cut it in half and I'll put half aside since we're only doing one batch, and peel off that layer. And this is something that I think is important for everyone to know too, just in terms of how to hold a knife. Whatever works for you, go for it. But I find that pinching the blade between your thumb and your forefinger and wrapping your fingers around the handle, that gives me the most control because I'm not wobbly here. and I'm not wobbly with my pointer up on the blade. I'm holding both parts of the knife. And now I've got my half an onion, and I'm gonna chop up to the root, but not through it. I'm gonna have all these pieces, all these, and you can even use the lines there as a guide. But if I went through the root here, I'd have all these pieces all over the cutting board. This way it's held together at the end so that I'm not having to do a whole lot of extra chopping. And if you do go through the root, it's not a big deal. It's fine. It's just, you know, sometimes the thing that prevents us from cooking is there's so much chopping. It takes so much time. So by having some of these skills, you can move a little more quickly. So I'm chopping this up to the point where it starts to feel wobbly, and then I just flip it on its side and I continue. And that's that. And now I want to have everything ready to go. This is my mise en place, which is having everything in its place. I've got my 1 cup of orange juice. I've got my cashews. These are shredded beets and carrots. And you can use whatever color beet you like. I used the yellow beet. And you could use beet or carrot, or if there's another type of vegetable that you'd want to shred in, that's fine. These just blend right in with the flavor, which is great. And we're blending this all up so you won't know what's in there. Then we've got our beans, some white beans here, and then a little bit of spice. So I'm going to move this camera over here so you can get a nice view of the pot. Sorry if I'm making you dizzy here. How's that? Let's adjust that just a bit. Okay, let's go. There we go. So I'm gonna add just about a tablespoon of olive oil. The original recipe, I think it might call for a half a stick of butter, but I find that just a little bit of that in the pan, a little bit of that healthy olive oil works just fine. And I already heated my pot a little bit just to save some time, so this probably will sizzle right away. Let's see. Yeah. And now we're not cooking it enough so that it browns. We're just getting it to the point in which it's translucent. However, if you want a richer onion flavor, you can just like crank the heat and fry it a little bit, or you could caramelize it, cook it low and slow for a longer period of time, and that would make it sweeter. So we're just gonna let that go for a second. And when I say a second, I mean like 2 to 3 minutes. I think the recipe probably says 3 to 5 minutes, but this will be just fine. Something that we add to this, which I think is fascinating, is baking soda. It's just a 1/4 teaspoon, but because we're using orange and tomato, which are very acidic, this helps to balance it out. But you don't want to add too much because then it'll start to taste a little bit soapy. Just a 1/4 teaspoon is perfect. We're going to add a little bit of thyme, about a half teaspoon of thyme, a half teaspoon of black pepper, and a teaspoon of salt. And if you're watching your sodium and don't want to add that salt, there's so much flavor in here, you won't miss it. It's fine to leave that out. And then the tomatoes that I'm using these are fire roasted, and I love that flavor. So I go for the fire roasted, but you could go for any diced or crushed tomato. I'm using a can of crushed and a can of diced. It's all going to get pureed anyhow. So the shape of those tomatoes don't really matter. And I'm going to just go ahead and add my spices now. So I've got a half teaspoon of the pepper and the thyme. I like the dried thyme in here more than fresh. It's a little bit more of like a background note instead of like super front and center. I like it to be more blended in. And then we've got our salt, and the beans make it really creamy and thick and adds all that really good fiber and protein. And then the cashews kind of bring in this other element of creaminess. So I like to use both, but it would be fine to just use the beans and leave the cashews out. These cashews are not toasted. I don't want a strong cashew flavor. And if the cashews were toasted, then that would be bringing in that flavor. So I want to just be using raw cashews. And now I'll add my tomatoes straight from the can. And then I'm going to add a cup of beans. Now you can, in the recipe, I actually say use half a can of beans, drain them, and then use half a can, and then you can stir the rest of the beans in at the end. This is if you have some people at your table who do like the texture of beans. So you can set some aside for the person who doesn't want them, that wants it all blended together, and then still have some to sprinkle in and stir in. And similarly, I have spinach or another type of dark leafy green in the recipe that you can just wilt in at the end. And again, that would be for the person who wants to eat those ingredients, but you can set some aside for the person who's not going to have that. You could probably get some greens in here and blend it right in, and it would be great. I think spinach would be the way to go because it's the least flavorful. So we'll get our beans in here, and these are butter beans, lima beans, cannellini, or Great Northern beans. Really, any of the lighter beans would be just fine in here. I bet chickpeas would work too. So we're going to just let that thicken, and we'll get that going for about 10 minutes. We'll just bring it to, oh, I forgot our vegetables. Don't do that. Oh, we got to get our carrots and our beets in here. We got a cup in there. So that's going to help to soften those and cook them, the heat there. And what we'll do now is wait for that. And once it's thickened in about 10 minutes, then we'll put it in the blender with orange juice, blend it all up, get it back in the pot. I mean, look at the color on that. It's so, I mean, it's just gorgeous. It's alive. So it's going to taste really good. Well, while that is cooking, I'm going to move on and start working on this dressing and move some of these things aside. So our dressing here, also we're using white beans, and we're going to blend up white beans with some herbs to make a ranch dressing. And this is a template of sorts. So you're going to have a recipe for a ranch dressing and also a Caesar salad dressing. And know that you could also do other creamy dressings, like using the same kind of a formula, the same format. But if you added a lot more herbs, maybe some tarragon is a key ingredient in green goddess dressing. So you could do a version of that. You can really play around with this. But this is, you know, you're having beans, you're already getting fiber before you even have it on, you know, your dressing is giving you all this fiber. So I think that's pretty cool. And I also want to mention that this isn't just for salads, right? We have this as a dressing, but you could put this on your beans, double beans. If you have, you know, a baked sweet potato with, you know, different ingredients on top, or a grain bowl or a bean bowl. So it could also be a dip. You could make it a little on the thicker side. And that way, you know, if you start with it thick, then you can thin it out if you want to use it for a salad dressing, if you wish. So you're adding beans for this fiber, but without changing the flavor. And I'm going to just check my recipe here. We're going to use a cup. I'm going to use this. Good, we're simmering back here. We like that. We're going to use a cup of beans here, and we'll use a tablespoon of olive oil, We're going to add some lemon juice. And now if you like a more lemony dressing or sauce, then you could always add the zest, because the zest is going to bring in more lemon flavor without more liquid, without, you might have a acidic enough, so you don't want to add more of the juice, but maybe you do want to add more lemon flavor. So the way to go with that is just by adding the zest. So I'm just using my fingers as a strainer to catch the seeds. And again, we're using about 2 tablespoons. And then we're going to use a little bit of white vinegar for that kind of classic zing of the ranch dressing. So just not much, just a teaspoon. And we're also going to use a teaspoon of Dijon mustard. Let's give this a stir. It is already starting to thicken. That's what we like. What we're going for here. And now we're going to get our Dijon mustard and a garlic clove. And here we're going to use a teaspoon of dried dill. And while you can use fresh dill, dried dill really gives it that kind of classic ranch flavor. So I prefer to use dried dill in this. And then you can add some parsley, some tarragon, whatever other herbs you like, but that dill tends to be what shines the most. So you could also just chop, if you'd like, you could chop these ingredients, these herbs, and then stir them in at the end. That's actually what we're going to do with these chives here, because that's pretty classic in a dressing like this. So we're going to combine all these. You could also put a touch of cayenne pepper if you wanted a little heat. Not as kind of traditional, but I tend to like just a little bit. And we're going to add just a little bit of salt and black pepper too. So another key ingredient here. So we want to thin this out a little bit. I'm using the aquafaba, which is the liquid from the can that I got these beans out of. If you are cooking your beans on your own, you could use the liquid that you cook the beans in, just that water. It does bring in like a nice creamy element, but you could use water too. It's completely fine. But I'm going to add some of this, and then I can add more to thin it. Okay. Michelle, if there's a way to mute me, you might want to do that.
I did try muting, but I can't turn the microphone back on. So you'll have to make sure that's turned back on. Sorry. It wasn't that loud. I don't think we're going to mute in the future. It was fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this looks so good. It smells just like ranch, but it's based in beans. And here we go. If you wanted, again, to make this on the thicker side, to have it as a dip, that would be really nice. You could also use this kind of as a mayonnaise substitute. So I could see using this in a coleslaw or in a potato salad. That would be really, really lovely. With summer coming up, all these different types of salads. Or you could, again, do beans on beans. You could make a 3-bean salad with a lot of different vegetables mixed in and dress it with this. So you can see that this, how the texture is. But again, you can go thicker or thinner. And now I'm going to chop up some of our chives here and stir those in. Now, chives are something, they're an ingredient that can go pretty quickly in the fridge. So to keep them fresh, I recommend washing them right away when you get them home and then drying them very, very well. You're washing them because there's like a little bit of a coating on the outside just from how they grow that you want to rinse off because that makes them go bad faster. And then dry them really well so they don't get mushy. and then wrap them in a damp paper towel and put that in a plastic bag in your fridge. And that should keep for at least a week, probably longer. You could also put them upright in a glass of water, like a bouquet of flowers, and then keep that in the door of your fridge or on the top shelf where it's warmer, the warmer parts of your fridge. And that should also help them to stay fresh. So we've got our chives. We can mix these in, and maybe I'll set some aside. I'm thinking like about our picky eaters, right? I'm not sure how we'll do with chives, but you could sprinkle some of these on top of your tomato soup if you liked. And if you just want the chive flavor and you think your picky eaters are not going to be down with having these chopped herbs in there, you can just go ahead and blend it right up. Okay, so there's our dressing. Now I'm going to do a quick blender wash, and then we'll get back to our soup. Okay, here we go. Our soup, you can see how thick it's already gotten. It's a very short amount of time. And now I would like to blend this in 2 batches. I want to make sure that whenever I'm blending, especially hot liquid, I don't want to overflow it. I don't want it to end up coming up and burning me, which is also why I will not put the top part into the blender lid. I'll just cover it with the towel like this so that if it does its gurgle thing, it'll just hit the towel and not explode on me. Okay, so we're going to put about half of this in and half of our orange juice. I'm putting the orange juice in actually first because, there we go, because I want to make sure that the blades will easily cut through and it won't get stuck because it's so thick. So that looks good. Although I'm looking at this, I think we can do it in 1 batch. Famous last words. Let's try this. So remember, we've got all those beans in there. We've got our carrots and we have our beets. I'm going to make sure my lid's on really tight and cover this up and give it a nice blend. Check in, Michelle. Are any questions coming in?
Okay, the first one, love this. That's how it starts. I like that. Can't wait to recreate these recipes. Curious about nut-free subs for the cashews.
Nut-free subs for the cashews, sunflower seeds.
All right.
Yeah, they would make it, just again, make sure that they're raw and not toasted. Unless
Perfect.
you want to bring in that flavor of toasted sunflower seeds, which would be delicious.
So toasting it makes it stronger, right?
It does. It brings in a stronger flavor. And actually, as I'm thinking about this and the cashews, I mean, I could see if you did toast the cashews, some of these flavors here, we've got cashew and tomato and even that orange. I could see bringing it in kind of a Thai direction. And if you were to do that, you could have that toasted toasted cashew, and then put in some different curry spices, like
Mhm.
maybe add some cumin or coriander, some turmeric, rather than the thyme. So you could bring it in a different direction.
Oh, that's a great idea. I love all the options there.
Yes.
All right, next question. I buy organic canned beans packed only in seaweed kombucha. Should I drain or use as liquid? There's nothing else added.
Um, can you repeat it? With there is kombu in there, or
Seaweed kombucha.
seaweed kombucha? I'm not familiar with seaweed kombucha. I would just say it depends on the flavor.
Yeah.
Really. I think I would taste it and find out for yourself if you think that this would be too strong of a flavor to use in here.
Right. I know one time I had somebody make black bean brownies with black beans that were like that. And most people couldn't taste the seaweed. I could. They tasted like fish to me. And so I think it just depends on the person's taste buds and what they pick up and what they don't. And if you're used to the flavor and it doesn't faze you, then it's probably great.
Sure.
Next question. What kind of beans are in the dressing?
In the dressing, I use butter beans.
Butter beans.
So let me hold these up closely so you can see what they look like.
Now, are butter beans your favorite beans for this recipe?
Not necessarily. I mean, you honestly can't taste them. So they're just a very soft, tender bean. But
Yeah.
you really could use any white bean. It's what I had on hand.
Perfect. I love that. Very versatile.
Mm-hmm.
And the last question.
In fact, I realized that I could have just used one can of beans. I did want to, just for variety's sake, show you using two different kinds of beans, but I'm only using a whole can for both of these. However, for the soup, you could use the whole can, like I said, to either blend them all in or add them at the end.
Fabulous. And the last question, how do you deal with tears from cutting onions?
I have my students chop for me.
Oh, that's great.
Well, one thing that I will mention is when you can chop faster, safely, but chop faster when you really have a good grasp on your knife and you have that technique down, it goes by much more quickly. So you don't, you're not exposed to those chemical reactions for as long a period of time. So it tends to be a pretty quick experience, and therefore I've heard so many things that you all probably have heard too, as far as putting a piece of bread in your mouth, wearing goggles.
Yes. Swimming goggles did work for my daughter when she was younger. That was the only way I could have her in the kitchen while I was chopping onions.
Okay.
But she wasn't chopping them, I was. So I think it was more of a just idea for her. Those are all the questions. Oh, wait, no, we have another one come in. Two more. So liquefying the beans doesn't change the fiber qualities.
No, it doesn't.
Wonderful. I love that. We all love that.
I feel like it's really cool. Like this whole dressing, before you even get to put it on any vegetables, you're already getting all this fiber.
Yes, I love that too. And I think that's one thing to remember, that blending up things does not get rid of the fiber, but juicing it does, because juicing removes the pulp, which is where the fiber is. The fiber is not in the juice itself, it's in the pulp.
Right. And if you think about having apple juice, for example, right, the difference between a whole apple and apple juice, the apple juice just goes right to your system and spikes your sugar. And it has this different impact on you because you don't have all of the actual fruit and skin to slow it down so that it can slowly absorb into your body. Similarly with beans, if you were to juice a bean, you're not going to get actually like the tangible contents. It's just the liquid.
Right.
Which is why it's good to have whole foods in general, and kind of the difference between a smoothie and a juice.
Absolutely. And having the pulp does help a lot with blood sugar control, which most people think is only good for people with diabetes. It's good for all of us. So next question. Were you using English chives or garlic chives?
I was using English chives, but go for it. If you like garlic chives, I think those would be great in here. You know, we're in springtime, all sorts of different types of spring onions and herbs are coming in. So
Right.
go like.
I do like that you're encouraging so much variety here, just because you can take a recipe and make it into something completely different by changing just a few ingredients in it. All right, last question from what I have so far.
Before you say that, I just want to say one thing about that, which is why I really like people to get the recipes after class, because I think it's easy to be looking at the recipe and even think, oh, wait, it says this, but she's doing that. I like to send people away with so many different variations that maybe a recipe says to use, you know, sunflower seeds, but I'm using sesame seeds. And I don't want you to feel confused. I want you to realize, oh, right, this is not super rigid. This is much more of a experiential experience, right?
Yes, like like a fun little experiment, like when we were kids and we liked to play with food a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. What amount of OJ did you add to the soup?
I've got 1 cup of OJ. And on the subject of fiber, we were just talking about not using the juice, but keeping the whole ingredient. And it makes me think that what I want to do next time I make this is just peel the orange and put the whole thing in there, pulp and all.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, because now that we're having this conversation, I'm thinking, well, why not? Like, I don't see why that. I mean, we're blending it, so it's not like we're going to have a weird orange texture.
Right.
And just including more of that fiber.
Yeah. No, that's great. Wonderful. Those are all the questions that I have for now.
Okay, great. And this is how recipes are evolved and are developed. Next time I might teach this and I'll use a whole orange. All right, let's move this camera back over. So now we'll pour this right in. Yep, it's super creamy. And again, depending on who you are feeding, what kind of a palate they have, textures, flavors, you could put a little sprinkle of chive or any type of herb on there. You could wilt some spinach. You could put this back in the pot and wilt some spinach. You could add some more beans into it if some people do like the texture. So there are all sorts of different variations that you can add here. Okay, you know, cilantro would be really nice too if you were taking in that other direction with the curry spices. I would definitely want to do a little bit of that, and maybe another squeeze of lemon, or maybe even a little bit of lime would be lovely. So there's our soup. Now the last recipe is the smoothie recipe, which I am really excited about. I've been having this a lot of days lately, playing around with some of my favorite ingredients. So we've got mint, and this is a mint chocolate smoothie. And we've got mint in here. And if you don't have mint, something that I like to keep on hand is mint extract. So this is just a peppermint extract, and it lasts for a really long time in your pantry, and just a few drops will make your food super minty. It's just like a vanilla extract, only mint. So again, if you don't have fresh mint. I'm getting greens into this smoothie. So we've got some kale here, but you could always use a different type of green if you wish. And then I've got cacao or poor cocoa powder. So this is going to be more of a brown color than a green, depending on how much greens you put in there. And then I use a little bit of almond powder, which helps really make this kind of richer and fuller, along with the secret ingredient. So I've got, well, this isn't the secret ingredient, but I did put frozen banana in there and lentils. So lentils are key to this smoothie. And what I do is I cook them ahead of time, and then I lay them out on a baking sheet, just like this, on a towel, on a dish towel, even layer to let them air dry. And then I'll just move them around a little bit just to make sure they're really, really dry, because I'm going to put them in the freezer and I don't want them to end up being a one big clump. So I let them dry, and then I transfer them onto a baking sheet like this on parchment paper in an even layer, put them in the freezer and put them in for about an hour, and then take them out and move them around so that they freeze evenly. And then I can take them at this point and put them in a freezer container or in a plastic bag, a Ziploc freezer bag, and keep them in the freezer. And I love having frozen beans and lentils and chickpeas on hand, because they're just like canned, like they're just ready to go. I always just put a handful or two of lentils in my smoothie, and we're using a half a cup in this smoothie. And that's a good amount of fiber, a really good amount of protein. And then whatever type of milk you like, whatever type of liquid that you want to blend it up with. And so this is what it ends up looking like blended. There you go. And similarly to these two other dishes, you can make them as thick or as thin as you like. It's so good. And I want to talk you through really quickly how to cook lentils, because I think people can get a little bit intimidated by that, because there's just a lot of different types of instructions out there, but it's really very simple. Pretty much every lentil that's a darker color, brown or black or dark green, they're going to hold their shape. A lighter color lentil or split lentil, like the red ones or yellow, they're going to turn to mush. So for these, when I want them to hold, if it's going to turn to mush, I'm not going to put them in the freezer, right? But I could just cook them and put them right in the smoothie once they've cooled. But for ones that hold their shape, what I do is first, for any lentil, I'll just sort through them to make sure that there's no like little debris, like sticks or pebbles. They grow so close to the ground that I want to make sure that I'm not going to chip a tooth on a little rock. Now, I've been cooking with lentils for years and years and years, and I've never found anything in them. However, I know that that does happen every once in a while, so better to be on the safe side. So I'll just sift through them, usually on a white plate or surface, so it's easier to see if there is anything foreign in there. And then I'll give them a rinse. You can also soak them if you're concerned about digestion. Soaking them does help with digestion, and you can soak them, overnight if you like, or just a few hours. That also helps with cooking time. But because they're so quick to cook, you don't need to soak them for the sake of time. But I would, regardless of soaking or not, give them a rinse, since they're growing very close to the dirt. And then put them in a pot with enough water, just like pasta, so that they can swim around. We don't want the liquid to come below the level of the lentils. So we just bring it to a boil and then lower it to a simmer. So it's just gently simmering. And depending on the type of lentil, and also how long it's been when it was harvested and how long it's been out of the ground, that'll determine how long it'll take to cook them. Of course, just like anything, if you have garlic, a head of garlic that's been, sitting around for a long time, it's going to dry out more. Same with lentils. So it's just going to take more time to cook, get that water to rehydrate it. So, maybe it's 20 minutes or so. And then I drain them and I rinse them with cold water so that they don't continue to cook. If they're all in the sieve or colander piled up on top of each other hot after draining, they're going to continue to break down and cook. So make sure that you rinse them under cold water, and then you can spread them out on a sheet tray on a towel if it is the process that you're going to do is freeze them. And that's really all you need to do for your lentils. They'll keep well in the fridge for, up to 5 days, I would say, in an airtight container. So that's another really nice option too, just to make, some to keep in your fridge, keep in your freezer. If you find, oh no, I'm not going to get through all of these, and I made this whole batch that's in my fridge, go ahead and put them in the freezer. That you can definitely do that. So again, this was a mint chocolate smoothie, but I've put these in other smoothies too. I like to make a smoothie with strawberries and blueberries, and I love putting lentils in there too. It's just, you know, a natural thickening agent, and you can't taste them. You don't know that they're in there. But there's just, you know, so much goodness with that fiber and the protein in here and other polyphenols. So really, you can put them in any smoothie and you won't even know that they're in there in terms of the flavor or the texture. So I'm going to quickly get my cheat sheet here and come join you on this side of the table. Are any questions coming in?
Have any new questions yet? So I think you've answered most of them. I think at this time we're good to share the recipes. Is that correct?
Sure. Yep. Mm-hmm.
All right. So we are going to go ahead and make the recipes live. So if you click on handouts in your chat area, you can go ahead and click download and have the recipes for yourself.
And a couple of things that I wanted to mention. There was recently an article in the New York Times about picky eaters, and they were talking about a book that's coming out all on picky eaters. And I was looking through the comments that followed the article, and one comment really stood out to me. You know, I know that we're not all here because of picky eaters that are children, but this commenter was talking about children. And I love what she wrote. She said, "Hot tip. I started watching cooking and baking shows with my son. We started with the Great British Baking Show. He got to see people trying new and different foods and liking it, or they didn't like it and lived and simply didn't eat more. I now ask him to try everything, and then I ask him to rank it. I'll even sometimes get a Hollywood handshake. Ha! There is zero resistance to trying new things. He is 5. We started these shows at 3.5. He's still discerning and sensitive to spice, but he's adventurous, and I know he'll continue expanding his palate. Try it." So I think that speaks to getting young people involved as well. You know, if they're in the kitchen with you, they're more invested, they're more excited because they had a part in creating that dish. And better yet, if they're able to, you know, garden with you or are involved in some kind of a school garden project and are starting to understand how this is coming from the ground. I mean, it is so fascinating to have them understand that they're planting a seed, which then turns into this vegetable, and they watch it grow, and then they get to eat it. They're
Absolutely
much to try it if they have part of that whole experience.
Yes, I love that. And I have a 14-year-old, and we have been watching the Great British Baking Show for a long time, since she was very little, and she still looks forward to it every season. So I love that idea of just exposing them to different foods, strange foods you've never heard of before, but just trying it. I do have another question that has come in.
Okay.
So I'm going to put that one up here. It sounds like the tomato orange soup could also be served as a cold soup in the summertime. So it wasn't really a question, it was more of a comment.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Gregory. Absolutely. Yes.
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 I love that. Versatility is so good. And since we don't have questions, I'm going to go back to the messages where I can see all of them. And there is another question. Can you suggest other uses for frozen lentils beyond smoothies? Maybe something like nice cream.
Yes. Great suggestion. You just gave it to us. I think you could certainly put them in a food processor with some bananas and blend that right up. I'm going to go on this tangent and play around in my kitchen this summer. I think that's a great idea. I think you could definitely do that. Some other things. Maybe like a yogurt bark. You could use some kind of a yogurt bark. What are some other, I'm trying to think of some other ways that we eat our frozen foods other than smoothies and desserts. Do we ever have not hot, but like savory food very cold? I'm going to have to think on this one.
Not here. In some countries they do. But I was going to say smoothie bowls is the same thing as smoothies, kind of, but it is where the smoothie is a base and then you have various toppings to it. That would be another good one.
Right. And there, yeah, like you mentioned, in other cultures, other countries, there are some, usually I think they're warm, but there are bean-based desserts that are kind of like puddings and, on the thicker side like that. But I just, I mostly have them in my freezer so they can just have them already cooked and ready to go. And you can get them in a can, and some places sell them vacuum packed too.
So here's the next question. Using lentils in the smoothie, could you just use lentils that you have in the refrigerator, or is there a benefit to freezing them?
So I like freezing them because the texture, it will be thicker.
Got it.
And also colder. I like that it helps it stay cold and thick, but definitely you can use them. And same thing with using lentils, like red lentils or split lentils that are softer and have, broken down into more of like a mushy texture. You can still put those right in the blender.
So mixing the dark and light colored lentils with that would lead to a different texture, right?
If you're doing it in a smoothie specifically,
it didn't ask if it was in a smoothie or not, just in general.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't. It depends on what dish you're trying to make. Like, what's your outcome that you're looking for? Because typically, I wouldn't be cooking
in a soup.
Okay, in a soup, I would put them in a soup together. Just know that the lighter color ones are going to break down more, and the darker ones are going to give you more texture.
Wonderful.
Yeah, you could put all sorts of legumes, all sorts of pulses and lentils and beans and chickpeas into your soup.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And one more question about the soup. Can you use raw tomatoes in the soup, or should you roast them first?
I would roast them first. I think it's going to bring in more flavor, and it's also it's more of a concentrated flavor, and also concentrated, like less watery, less liquidy.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question though. I could see like some sun gold tomatoes, some of the little cherry ones that are so sweet, roasting those and blending those up. That would be really yummy. And we did a lot of blending today. So
yes.
I did want to mention, how you can always like use, like, if you're making burgers or you're making tacos or pasta sauce, you can put some of these beans or vegetables mixed in, and they, anything with like marinara seasoning, you can just kind of think that it's like a bolognese and that it's ground beef. Or you could even be using a burger that's, part of it is beef and then part of it's your lentils, part of it's mushrooms. So just, if you don't want to just jettison beef altogether for your burger, cutting down and making the ratio different. And over time, your taste buds and what your expectations are do adjust over time. And taco seasoning masks everything. So putting those beans in there and using, these ingredients in ways that like there are traditions that have been using them these ways forever. So maybe some of your pickier eaters will really like beans if they're used in preparations how they've always been used, which like a lot of different Central and South American cuisines are using beans in such fabulous ways. And remember our pastas that are legume based rather than flour.
Yeah, those do help with blood sugar control for a lot of people, and they're also a great gluten-free option for people. So we do appreciate those. Another question, a little off topic, but a great question. What could be added to avocados to make ice cream?
My first thought was banana, because they're both just so creamy. I think I would think about making some kind of a mint. I would go with mint because it already has that green color,
right?
And then you could add mint leaves, but also some of that extract, which is a really strong flavor, and maybe do the mint chocolate situation with the avocado. I think that could work well. And then also when the avocado starts to turn color, you're like, you don't even know because it's I've done that before. I've made like an avocado chocolate mousse or pudding, And, you know, if you have a guacamole and it's in the fridge and after a few days it's starting to look a little funky, it still tastes fine. But when it's just blended with something chocolatey, some cocoa powder, then you don't even tell. You can't tell that it's oxidized.
Right. Yeah. I know my daughter and I used to make avocado ice cream. And I know one of the things was that depending on the avocado, you may have to use something like honey or maple syrup to get a little bit more sweetness, to just cover up that flavor, that avocado flavor enough so it feels like ice cream. But yes, the mint was perfect. Perfect.
Yeah, but I agree. Like it needs something to sweeten it up a little bit, whether it's your honey, your date, maple syrup, or banana. And I like these because, you know, when we're thinking about, you know, that could be dessert, that could be a snack. A snack is often the place where it's most difficult to get fiber in. And I think, you know, that's a good way to get some fiber in there. And even if it's, you know, making a version of like chickpea hummus that it's a little bit on the sweeter side, and then it's kind of like a cookie dough. I know, you know, on the Facebook group, in your Facebook group, there's all sorts of suggestions around that. But, you know, thinking about snacks and how like dips, for example, are familiar, you know, it's not something super strange. So you make this, you know, ranch dip, and it might be more likely that your picky eater will snack on that with some vegetables. Or, you know, using that for the base of a wrap instead of your sour cream or mayonnaise.
No, that is great. And I love the fact that it's familiar things that our picky eaters already love. And again, the textures, the flavors. I do have 2 more questions, so I'm going to go to those right now. Would textured vegetable protein, so TVP, work instead of lentils?
I haven't tried that. My gut is saying no.
That's what my gut is saying as well. That's what my gut is saying as well. And I do believe that you're going to have more fiber in the lentils than you would in TVP. And the next question, what kind of chocolate powder do you use?
Sure. So I usually use cacao powder that I get at one of the larger grocery stores, or like grocery outlet. I don't know where you're located, but grocery outlet is a place that I can get that. You could use cocoa powder or cacao. Cacao is just not processed as much. So it's going to have more minerals, but it's really, both are great.
Yeah. Yeah, I think both of them are fabulous as well.
Cacao much more expensive, which is why if I'm going to get that, I'm getting at one of the more discounted stores.
That's a great tip. Thank you. I'm looking over at the handouts, and we have 50% of people that have downloaded the recipes. Again, if you have not downloaded the recipes, now's the time to go in and click on them. So in the chat window, if you click on handouts, you will get to see the Pleasing Picky Eaters Recipes PDF, and you just hit download. And we're up to 52% of the audience. That's great. So if you'll just go in under handouts in the chat section and click on download, then you can get the recipes for yourself.
I'm looking in the chat and I see a suggestion here about using silken tofu. Thanks for bringing that up, Karen. And I do think silken tofu would work well in a smoothie or in this blended soup. It's not going to have as much fiber. So just know that.
Yeah, so tofu is a processed food, so it is not a 75% food because it is processed, whereas lentils are. So yeah, that is great. Okay, well, I think that we are finished unless there's any other questions, last minute questions. I did put Lauren's website in the chat earlier, and I'm going to go ahead and add it in one more time. And if you will take the time to share in something that you enjoyed about this workshop, maybe your favorite recipe or your favorite recipe tip, we want Lauren to know what made a difference for you. And I know for me, it was learning about freezing lentils because I've never done that before, using them in smoothies. I've just kind of opened them, usually the packaged ones and just thrown them in there. So I do love the tip about freezing them. Thank you for sharing that. So if you have anything else that you really enjoyed, type it in. And thank you all for being here today. Again, Lauren's website is laurenchandlercooks.com, and we have linked it higher up. We also want you, if you don't have an account with Full Plate Living, we urge you to go to FullPlateLiving.org and sign up. And we do these live workshops every month. So we will have our next workshop in April on sleep. So we learned how to cook today. Next month, we're going to talk about how to sleep better. Thank you all for being here with us today. Thank you, Lauren, for your time and for the delicious recipes. I'm really looking forward to trying them this upcoming week. And I hope that everybody has a great, great rest of your week, weekend, whatever's coming up for you. Bye, everyone.